In 1929, a group of historians were dusting off old documents in a palace in Istanbul, and they found something that should not exist: a map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. On the surface, it looks like any other map from that era. It was rough around the edges and imprecise in places, the kind of thing you'd expect from a sailor 500 years ago. But when you take a closer look at the bottom of the map, everything changes. Because at the bottom of the Piri Reis map is Antarctica. Antarctica, drawn in 1513, 370 years before Antarctica was officially discovered in 1820. And now the obvious response is, so what? Maybe it was a guess. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe cartographers of that era just drew land masses at the bottom of maps to balance them out. That's what the official explanation says anyway. And it's a reasonable explanation until you take a closer look. Because the coastline of the Piri Reis map doesn't just vaguely suggest Antarctica, it matches the subglacial coastline of Antarctica, the coastline underneath the ice, the one buried under kilometres of frozen water that we didn't map properly until the 1950s, using sonar, technology that didn't exist in 1513. I'll say that again. The map drawn in 1513 shows a coastline that was only accurately mapped in the 20th century, using equipment that hadn't even been invented yet. In 1960, a professor at Georgetown University named Charles Hapgood presented this map to the United States Air Force Cartographic Division. He asked them to compare the Piri Reis coastline against modern sonar maps of subglacial Antarctica, and their response was not what he expected. They confirmed the match. The Air Force wrote back and said, and I'm paraphrasing, that the geographical details shown on the map was beyond the knowledge of any cartographer in 1513. They had no explanation for how it got there. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Piri Reis didn't claim to have discovered this himself. He wrote notes on the map explaining his sources. He said he compiled it from older maps, much older maps, maps he claimed to have dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. And that means that someone mapped Antarctica before the ice came, before it was buried, when the coastline was visible. The last time Antarctica was ice-free enough to be mapped was approximately 12,000 years ago. 12,000 years ago. That's before the Egyptians built the pyramids, before the Stonehenge, before every civilization we currently have records for. But yet there was someone there, someone with ships, someone with the ability to accurately survey a continental coastline, someone whose maps were still being copied and passed down through the libraries and archives for thousands of years, until an Ottoman admiral found them and included them in his own map in 1513. And the mainstream response to all of this is dismissal. Hapgood is fringe. Graham Hancock, who built on his work, is also fringe. The map is coincidental, and the notes on the map are unreliable. And maybe they're right. But here's what I keep coming back to. We know that ancient libraries existed. The Library of Alexandria held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, most of which were destroyed. We have no idea what knowledge was in those scrolls. We have no idea what maps were copied, preserved, or passed along. We assume the ancient world was primitive because we only have fragments of what they left behind. But what if those fragments are pointing at something we don't want to accept? What if there was a civilization before us, advanced enough to sail, advanced enough to survey, advanced enough to map a continent that we couldn't map ourselves until the age of sonar and satellites? And what if everything they knew almost disappeared? Almost. But someone kept those maps, and one of them ended up in a palace in Istanbul, covered in dust, waiting 300 years to be found. The map that shouldn't exist exists. What's something you've learned that you can never unlearn? Drop it in the comments below.